What's up, everybody? This is Chris Brackett. You're listening to LandLife Podcast after Thanksgiving. This is the time when I probably look forward to deer season even more than opening day, really, because I'm a food plotter. If you know me, you know that I am a food plotter through and through. Corn, beans, alfalfa, clover, brassicas, sorghum, sunflowers. Man, this is just the time of year that I really wait for all year long when it comes to capitalizing on big whitetails. It varies year to year, but very consistently, you get into the last week in November, you get into that first week of December, and truly the game changes. Half the people that showed up to the game go home. They've done killed their deer. They've done had enough bow hunting. They've had enough gun hunting. They have enough venison. They're maybe not trophy hunters. They're maybe not after the big mature animals. Half of them check out, take their ball, and go home. And it is time for the diehards. It is time for the guys that food plot and land manage and spend their entire off season being woodsmen and pouring into their land. That is the land life. You guys, the land life is everything to do with buying ground, keeping ground, pouring into ponds and fish and making the land better, being a woodsman. And we're mainly concentrating on whitetails in my world and on this show, whitetails, ducks. We're in the middle of the rut. We're in the middle of whitetail rut. We're winding down from the first estrus does that started in late October, and now we're in late November, 30 days of bucks chasing and running and going crazy. And this is the time where we're going to start talking about where the food comes into play, how to kind of move your cameras around. And the main thing that we're going to talk about on this episode of Chris Brackett's Land Life Podcast, autumn olives and honeysuckle, the green-leafed little invasive tree plants that are all over the Midwest, especially Illinois and heading to Iowa, and they're all over Indiana, and they're just across the Midwest. And these deer have been living in them for 30 plus days, and it's time that the leaves fall off and the deer come out and they feed on food plots. I'm going to tell you right now how to hunt them, how to hunt those little autumn olive and honeysuckle groves that are in and around the whitetail food. And that can vary between what their normal browse pressure, their normal fields, their normal areas that they love to feed in already, or is that something that you planted or you're thinking about planting, or how to go about what to plant. I'm going to slow it down again, and we're going to talk about autumn olive and honeysuckle. Now, if you don't know what that is, and you go out in November in the Midwest in Illinois, you can look up autumn olive tree. You're going to see all these little red berries. You're going to see these little bitty green leaves, and they look about the size of a rabbit's ear. And there's thousands of them. And they're an invasive plant. I don't know the biology and where they came from, but I know that they're slowly going across the Midwest, and they're slowly taking over the big timber in Illinois, and have been for probably the last 2 decades. But it's getting more and more prolific in the infestation of these invasive plants. Now, this is a double-edged sword. The double-edged sword of it is it provides a good food source for whitetails when it's growing, when it's actively growing. I don't know what the protein is on it, but I know it's enough to keep them alive while they're rutting, while giving cover to the whitetail deer in the timber. So you got to think about how they're invasive and how they're hard to kill, number one. Number two, they grow, pretty much through the roots, kind of like a wild rhizome that travels through under the ground. And they also are, kind of spread by the little birds that eat them. So squirrels and rabbits and really the main way that I think they spread are through birds. So you're going to see all the sparrows and all the starlings and everything as they come down. They're going to be in and around these trees. Not only do they eat the red berries, but they they nest in them, and it gives them thermal cover. So thermal cover is something that every animal needs. It's the cover that they use to protect themselves. And the thermal cover, these birds on their migration south, except for things like sparrows and stuff, they're always here. They just are bouncing around and running rampant through these little trees, and they eat the little red berries. The red berries on the autumn olive tree is one of the preferred, little morsels for these birds, and they eat them. And then there are little white seeds inside that little red berry. They fly around and they crap them out all over, and then that will create a new tree, and then that new tree will create more berries, and then more berries, and they grow really, really fast. So they can get to 6, 7, 8 feet really, really fast. The difference is you can tell. I don't know their real like genus species name, but if you were to look at the two different trees, and you go into a wood lot and you look against the timber, about the time when we start losing the leaves of the oaks and the maples and all of our timber, you'll see this green underlying kind of 6 to 12 foot tall, covery, green leaved, I don't know, nature's masterpiece of these invasive trees. And it creates this cover to where if you didn't have them, you could see all the way through the timber for a half mile or to a mile. And so it does two things. It creates really good cover for the white-tailed deer to live in and thrive in. But that's only for half the season. When it gets cold, the leaves drop. When the leaves drop, the deer don't eat them. When the leaves drop and the deer don't eat them, then they're really exposed to the elements. And a lot of your hunting spots that have a lot of deer when these leaves are on, well, they're not that good once these leaves drop. They don't have a food source to browse on anymore on these little leaves. And then they're really left exposed to predation because, a predator can see all the way through. Sometimes the hunter being the predator, you can see all the way through there. And then when you go into your stand in December, these little trees have lost all their leaves, and they can see you, they can see your truck, they can see a lot farther. So they're a lot harder to hunt. So that little bit of pressure can really wreak havoc. But we're going to talk about this autumn olive. And as you can tell, it is very hard for me to say autumn olive and honeysuckle. But what I wanted to say is there are programs in Illinois where you can work with the Department of Natural Resources to rid these areas of these invasive plants. And they'll actually give you tax breaks, and there's a lot of stuff for stewardship programs. And so if you're interested in getting rid of these invasive trees, and I even think some locust trees, you can get a hold of them. But realize what I'm trying to talk about now. There's a lot of you going, well, I'm going to shut off this podcast, but I really want to key in on something. And I say, don't go anywhere, because if you understand the cycle that's happening with an autumn olive tree and the normal browse, the natural browse of deer in the timber and deer along these cornfields and soybean fields, if you're getting the light out of the south and you're going to have some really good vegetation of some small trees and some briars and some multiflora rose. And that is something that you want in your timber. This autumn olive, it's a double-edged sword. Some people you talk to, they're looking for that on a farm. Other people, they want this big, beautiful timber that doesn't have this invasive plant in it. And it's a double-edged sword because that's where the deer have been living for the last 2 or 3 weeks. I know your cameras feel like they're dead. You feel like that you're not a good hunter because you haven't seen all the deer. You feel like your land doesn't have the deer sign that it normally does. That is because these deer get in these areas that have these autumn olives and these green plants, and they don't have to go very far, one, for water, because they're getting the moisture from those green plants. So if you didn't know that white-tailed deer get most of their water, right, their water intake to survive comes from the green plants, whether it be eating clover and alfalfa, whether it be eating the brassicas in your food plots, whether it be eating these invasive plants, these little leaves. If they're eating green leaves, they're all full of water. They may have to eat a bunch of them, but a lot of the deer are getting that from them. They're not really drinking out of water puddles every day. They're not going down to the creeks and drinking every day. You're going to find these whitetails getting most of their water intake from these green plants. So imagine if you have 20 acres of timber and the whole thing are big oaks and maples and all these other big trees, these 20, 30-year-old trees. And then your whole underbrush is with this invasive olive branch tree with these green leaves. They're eating them just enough to stay alive, especially when it's been as hot as it's been. They're staying in them for cover, and they're losing the other bucks and does and playing, chase around and doing the rut all in these little groves of these things. And that's one of probably the biggest keys is once you're paying attention to these little areas and the cover in the timber, you're going to know more about your whitetail deer. So if you're going to pay attention to this stuff, you're going to tell right now, if you're in central Illinois, after the snow after we got 18 degrees last night temperature, man, these things are turning yellow. These leaves are turning yellow, and it gets me fired up because at the end of November, you're going to have bucks returning, looking for does. They're in like a really chill time of their rut where they've bred does, they've fought, they've chased, they know the pecking order, they know where the doe groups are, and they're being really chill around the backside kind of, I say the backside. If you have a feed area, cornfield, soybean field, clover, alfalfa, turnips, radishes, brassicas, things like that, and you look in the background of that, what does that background look like? Is that background multiflora rose? Is that scrub brush? Is that switchgrass? Is that native grass? To me, the best to look into would be if I'm sitting in my blinder stand, I look across my food plot. On the backside of my food plot, the whole thing has about a 10 or 15 to 20 foot border of switchgrass and kind of native type grasses where the deer have to kind of come out into that standing grass kind of as a staging area to where they can't stand back in the timber 50 yards, standing in the autumn olive, just peeking their head through, hitting scrapes and looking into the food plot going, well, there's nobody out to the party. I better just stay back here till other deer walk out. I want them to come to the edge of that switchgrass. I feel like once they come to the edge of that switchgrass or just trees planted on the outside, or there's some other weed or foxtail grass. If you get these soft edges, that's what's called a soft edge. If you get these soft edges where these deer just come out and stand in this soft edge and they can't really see into the food plot, I feel like if they commit to that first 10 feet of that food plot that is kind of a soft edge of native grasses or whatever, they're more apt, they're more likely to enter the food plot earlier because they've already come halfway. The number one thing of sales is to get someone halfway and they'll end up buying the car. So if you can get these deer to the edges to come out and stand in what they think is something that's hiding them, and they're looking around, and even though they may not see anybody out there, they're already committed to the plot. They're already standing in safety cover. Why not come out, get a little bit of bite of greens, a little bit of bite of salad or corn or beans, and then go, okay, I have a little bit of something in my stomach. Let me go back. Well, that may be all it takes to bring that big boy in daylight out to that food plot because maybe he can't see around a corner. Maybe he feels really secure and he's going to come out 5 or 6 yards out into that food plot. And so that is one of the scenarios where soft edges that I teach on my consults. I teach on my Instagram and my Facebook with Chris Brackett's LandLife. You can check them both out on Facebook and Instagram. But it's one of the things that I teach all my clients. It's one of the things I teach all my landowners that are buying land from me in Illinois. I'm a broker in Illinois with Herman Brothers Realty. These are the things I'm teaching about, these soft edges. So if I can sit back on my stand or my blind. And I look across this food plot of food and I can see this soft edge. And then inside that soft edge, I know that I've got 8 to 10 feet of this green invasive autumn olive plant. And then I know that I've got mast crops, oaks, kind of back in there with a mixture of these other trees. I know that I've got a really nice layering program. I don't even know if the word's program, but I know I've got a really nice layering situation where I've got big timber that they can go do their thing. I've got this edge of kind of underbrush of autumn olive and honeysuckle. And then you've got like this soft edge of these native grasses. And I'll even take it one step further. I will cut them a little, mower trail, just the size of my mower, whether it's a big one or just I go out there and ride the four-wheeler back and forth. I try to cut them a little entrance where I know that if they hit this area, they're going to come out of that autumn olive right into the plot. And then that's where I know that if he comes that far, he's just going to go ahead and continue through the plot and flow, which is another thing that I teach. I think all deer, no matter where they're at, from Arkansas to Texas to Maine, Illinois, Pennsylvania, I think all these deer flow. They have a generalized area where they like to go back to, and then they flow out through these little, what I call traps, that I set the traps, that if they enter those traps, they die. And that's what we teach on the consult, is how many traps we can get per 30 acres, per 10 acres, per 100 acres. How can you set up bulletproof, whether you bring them through food or cover or a staging area out to the bigger food sources, out to the big open areas, and then back through. So if I'm sitting that blind, I'm looking and I've got those layers. I've got the first edge, which is food. Then I've got the second edge, which has, 2 edges on that native grass soft edge. And then on the inside, I've got this really big ring of autumn olive. And then deeper in there, I've got the bigger timber that the sunlight really can't get to the bottom of, to create this autumn olive, kind of edge. It seems that the autumn olive and the honeysuckle is just really only kind of where the sunlight can get. So hillsides, little knobs of these big hillsides, these big ridges, on the side of these ridges, you're going to find them where the sunlight is coming, across the soybean field or a cornfield, and that sunlight's blazing into these trees that are 40, 50, 60 foot tall, 100 foot tall. And then the sunlight's getting in there, and these invasive suckers just gobble up that nutrients from the field and that sunlight, and they spread so fast because those birds are eating the seeds and dropping them all over, and they're crapping all over. And now you just got this impenetrable thicket. And you really have to work to get these autumn olives gone. You have to get somebody in there with an eater on the front of a drum disc situation where you got a bobcat in there and they're eating them, or you can go in and hack and squirt them with a chemical. And you can look all that stuff online, but it's a double-edged sword, because I think the farms that don't have these trees and this honeysuckle and stuff, when they don't have them, they don't seem to have the deer number that the farms that do have it is. And I believe that's a whole nother subject of Illinois and Midwestern timber that either hasn't been clear cut, because there's no money in anything but black walnuts and oaks. And when you take out these bigger trees of these mast crops, it doesn't really bother me. But if I was to go buy a farm right now and I wanted to sell these farms 5-10 years down the road, I would go in there and I would find, on 100 acres, I would probably find 5 areas that were probably 10 acres or maybe more. But I would clear cut the whole thing. I'm talking about everything completely taken out of there, all the tops, all the logs, everything out of there. And I would let that regen. You're going to see this land management kind of movement, I believe, in the next 5 to 10 years, that's going to be going in, for the guys that have the money, are going to be going in and buying property, completely logging every log off of it that, one, is worth any money. Number 2, you're going to be able to get the firewood guys in there, and they're going to cut the entire timber. And you're going to see guys that are just going to give the wood away to get this new regen, because that new regen is going to have all of the browse and all of the new plants. And if you can keep back this invasive plant from it, you can create some really incredible habitat that I don't believe that a lot of farms, especially in Illinois, have anymore. And that's really, boy, if you just took a couple 10 acres on each farm, that's 10% on a 100-acre farm. And you just took an acre or so, 10 acres. If you just took one area and clear cut that sucker, and you were to keep these autumn olive trees out of it, but the rest of your farm had that canopy and then that autumn olive and that honeysuckle, man, add some soft edges, bring some food out, let the farmer farm, but then leave some standing crops. Those are the things that we do when you get into the game changer land management stuff, where we just finished this contract. We're sending it out to about, 10 or 15 people right now, taking on it, these land audits and where I come to your farm and we go over all the stuff. But this is the stuff that I love, you guys. And this is the time of year. This is the time of year that is for food plotters. And then how would you hunt these? And those are kind of the questions I'm getting right now. Like, how would I hunt these? Well, if you've got standing beans, of course, those beans are going to depend on, are they ag beans? Did you get them in late? What kind of variety of species? Because a lot of times these soybeans will be too tall, and you're not going to be able to get a shot at a whitetail unless you're elevated. But if you have a plot that you can get in on the side of these plots and you're using something like a blind turtle, blind, you got to make sure they're brushed in, and don't be using the autumn olive and stuff to brush them in, because they're going to lose their leaves. But as you watch these leaves drop right now, you're going to watch these deer turn on like a dime. You're going to turn on like a light switch, and they're going to start feeding. And what phase are they in right now on November 27th? Well, right now, they are on this backside of the moon kind of situation, where the backside of the moon is not, in my experience or opinion, is as good as before the full moon. When I say backside of the moon, it's the backside of the full moon. And you've got a couple days in there where I think they can still see at night, and they're still kind of active because they've been on a pattern of walking in the big moon. And like, I had deer last night in the full moon that had shadows at midnight in these food plots I could see on my trail cameras. And to them, it's like the brightest night of the year. And so they're walking around all night. I think they kind of get on patterns of that. And so I find them moving. People are like, well, when are you going to hunt? Well, if I've got the time, I'm going to hunt in the morning and the evening, but I'm always going to stay an hour or two later. I'm always going to go in an hour or two earlier. If I had to pick a time of year where I was between, do I hunt mornings or evenings? Right now, I'm going to start switching to mornings. All right, I'm going to start switching to evenings. But as these trees drop these little green leaves, it's going to be harder for me to hunt mornings. That is one of the things that I would put a check on. A big old check would be, do I have the cover to get into the woods still to hunt these mornings? If I'm hunting with a gun right now, even into the second week of December, I'm still going in the morning. I'm going to sit as long as I can till noon, and I'm going to enjoy my life. I'm going to enjoy that hunt, because that's coming to an end soon. You boys that love hunting mornings, you guys down south, you're still got plenty of green down there. You guys are good on mornings. But when you get these deer coming back from food, coming into the timber, and as you lose these green leaves off these autumn olive trees, you're going to be really not able to get away with much on a morning movement. Also the same thing in the evenings. You guys are going to have to go in a little earlier. I'm talking 1 o'clock in the afternoon at the latest. Into some of these places, they're going to be moving in the middle of the day. They're going to be bedded really, really close, and they're going to be just coming out to the food, and they're going to be done with their movement at 3:30 and 4 o'clock. You're not going to get this late, right before dark movement. You might get one big buck that does it every once in a while. But if he's going to walk, man, he's bedded close. He's going to stand up and he is going to walk out there like, you've dreamed of for that you've dreamed a million times that he would do. They're going to do this at 2:00, 3:00, 4:00 is that kind of that key hour, that 3 to 4:00. And I realize that the times are different, but generally speaking, it's going to be before 4. We're having to stop hunting at like 5 or something right now, the end of November. You're going to really look for deer to be on their feet from 2 to 4. But the key to the guys that have been food plotting for a long time, they understand that if they're going to hunt that night, they have to have maybe somebody drop them off and maybe somebody pick them up because the deer aren't as scared of the vehicles. Number one. Number two is start getting that accustomed to it. If you have to, drive out there at 1 or noon and drive out. Do that a couple times a week. Let these deer see a vehicle coming in and out. You're just a farmer at that point. But the guys that have been food plotting, another big check mark for me is I have to remind myself and my clients in my little text message of all these people that I text every day, and as we're building that network, that's something that I would offer is where I'm giving reminders of things that we're doing on a daily and what these deer are really doing across, sometimes area specific, that you're going to have to be out there at 12:30, 1:00. You're going to have to sit for an hour and a half or 2 hours before ever seeing a deer, because you're not going to have the foliage that we were talking about the invasive plants. You're not going to have this, you're not going to be able to hide. You're really not going to be able to hide. So you might have to go in earlier and sit there. If you're going in at your regular times at 3:00, at 4:00, those deer have already been on their feet and they've moved in the middle of the day to browse to get some energy. And then they've laid back down closer to the food and you're busting them off and they're ping ponging, you're literally setting off one mouse trap with a ping pong ball and it's going and setting off these other mouse traps with ping pong balls and so on and so forth. If you bust these little fawns and these button heads that have been kicked away from their mom that have been eating on the food plot in the middle of the day all day long, and they bust with their tail up and they run into the thicket, do you really think Big Boy is going to come out into that food plot after you just ran Junior off and he went into the thicket and high alerted everybody? You're not really understanding what is happening in the woods. So I am here to try to help you. If you start doing a little more paying attention to how to get into your stands or blinds earlier to beat that first kind of early afternoon movement, because those deer are going to kind of pile on each other's senses. Like the first deer out, do they act squirrely? Do they go out, they eat a little bit and they go back in and they sit on the edges of these food plots? So the other deer are staging and they go, oh, that deer went out and that deer came back nice and relaxed. And then they all come back out together about 2:30. And then the bigger deer are standing back there and they're just chewing their cud. They're chewing their cud, watching these secondary deer, go out in the food plot. And if nobody blew and nobody started stomping and nobody came running back into the brush, they're going to be really relaxed and come out just like they're supposed to. But if you've never kind of played that through your head, like, well, my dad has just always taught me to just go out there at 3 and sit till 5. And I'm begging you to go out at 1 and go out half as many times, but go out earlier and you're going to have greater success, whether you're in that turtle blind that I'm talking about that you can brush in off the side. So, because to me, you're going to get into like a scenario where if I'm ground hunting, whether it's even on the ground in a hole with brush over me or whatever I can do to kind of stay on the ground rather than go up in a tree in these later days of the rut and the later days of the season, the more apt I am going to kill a big giant. And what I mean by that is, I really don't think people talk about that much. I know you see all the TV people and all the people pushing blinds and stuff to get as high as you can, to see as far as you can. And that's just not my advice or what I do. Mine is the absolute opposite. You will not normally, unless I'm using Miscanthus grass or green monster from White Gold, unless I'm using some type of border or hay bales or the topography, you're not going to see me over like 6 foot in the air. And normally my switchgrass will come to the bottom of the blind. I have to have enter and exit strategies where these deer have no idea that I even exist. It just seems like another farmer coming on the property, and then all of a sudden, boop, we're in the blind, and boop, we're out of the blind. And the more times that I can do that, the more times I can fool a deer. The more times I can fool a deer, the more deer I fool, the closer I am odds-wise to seeing a giant and us killing a giant. And so for me, I'm looking at Blind Turtle. They're out of Ohio. I'd really love to buy the company someday if they ever want to get rid of that. And make it even cooler, different colors. They're a Blind Turtle blind that's plastic, made out of incredible plastic. And I've watched it through the years become a better plastic. And my really good friends own it, and they created it out of necessity because they really wanted to just, wanted to hide. And then I started brushing them in more and more, probably taking it over the top. And I started having more success with those bad boys. And then I said to him, well, hey man, I don't need the fancy windows. I need to be able to afford 2 of them rather than 1 with fancy windows. So why don't you make me some blanks? So they, over a couple of years, they decided to make me some blanks. And I took these blanks, these Blind Turtle blanks. They look like a turtle, a green shelled turtle of plastic with a door. I wouldn't even say roto molded. They're just molded. And the back had a door you put on with a frame, but they had no windows. And I would take a Sawzall out when I would either place them or I was putting them all together, and I would Sawzall out the window. If I was hunting with a gun or a crossbow, the windows would be narrower, and I would cut them where I wanted them. Because I don't want to see behind me. I don't want a 360 view. I want 90 degrees in front of me where that wind's perfect. And the rest of it, I want camouflaged. I want it black, back in the shadows of the blind. And I would cut out these holes. And if you look on my Instagram, on Chris Brackett's LandLife Instagram or Facebook, I'll post some pictures of my turtles, but they absolutely disappear. I use Christmas trees and native grasses, and I just make them disappear. And I can take the boys, my nephews, my friends, my wife, and we can slip into the back of them and out of them better than climbing a ladder to get in a tree, especially as it gets later on in the year. You can always find a place to put this brushed in blind on the side of a field that just blends in with the surroundings. And I have shot more bone and Crockett whitetails. Some of these whitetails up here behind me, I've shot out of the Blind Turtle blinds. And I've just been using them forever. They're out of like Zanesville, Ohio. Look them up. If you guys aren't a dealer, you can become a dealer. But they are truly one of the greatest advantages, especially the rut on to the rest of the year, in being able to not spend $5,000 or $3,500 on a 360 or a shadow hunter. You get into a Blind Turtle that's on the ground, staked down to the ground, that looks like it's nothing but a brush pile, little beaver hut, and you could crawl in the back of that thing and get out of the back of that thing way more secretive, way cooler, way more fun, and get on these food plots. And and I've just really, I don't know why I got on this kick, but I really just advise people to not have to climb 5, 10, 15 feet up to this blind. When you get out at night, spook everything off of it and get out of it. I'm just a big advocate for, even if you have a shadow hunter or a 360, dude, brush that thing in on the ground or on like 2 foot little platform. My friend right now, Tim Sisk, has 360s. I think he has 6 of them right now. If you're in central Illinois, I will give you his number for Tim Sisk. I and my crew have some 360s that we've been using. I'd take spray paint half the windows in back because I don't use them, but I want to use them in front. And the greatest thing to brush in a hard-sided blind on the ground, whether you're shadow hunting it up, whether you're 360ing it up, I use a bungee system, like the spider web of the back you put in your truck to kind of hold things down. You go get that spider web from, an Amazon, order it online, or you can go, I think I went to like the farm store and I found like the truck department, and I would get these bungee spider web for the bed of your truck. And I would take the bungee spider webs and I would put them over the blind turtles, and I would use pieces of wood or like hooks that I would screw into this hard plastic. And like I was saying earlier, I've watched the plastic go from a plastic that would break to a plastic that, man, I can't break. Those blinds that are there out in my fields and out on the edge of my food plots, I'll have a stand above that for when the weather's nice. But when I need to slip in fast in or out, and I've got a lot of deer, man, I'll just slip into these turtles that are underneath my stands when I hunt this one food plot with this one wind. And if I can put a stand up and I can have a blind turtle there, my world is golden. I got two options. And I've watched the plastic get better. And I really think that if you were to explore some of these things, I don't know if whoever taught you how to deer hunt, that they never taught you that this is an option, but it is incredible the difference it makes getting in and out of food plots. And I really think that taking kind of this approach and paying attention right now to the woods and watching these leaves and even the grasses and stuff turning yellow. And as you watch it turning yellow, and I think so many people go, the deer aren't using my food plots. Well, how much in the timber is, one, green, when they can get water and nutrients? And number two, like, how long does it take to get this fat off from underneath their skin? We know how long it is to lose weight. Think about how long they have to go to burn all this stuff off. And, it could be a really long time. So, we're finally getting the weather that's going to dictate when these deer move. Now, November 27th, 18 degrees outside. This morning, it was freezing cold with a really high wind. Well, when you get those high winds in the morning and it's already frigid and cold, those deer are going to stay bedded. That's when you watch that wind die and the sun come out. And whether we got a little bit of snow here that's, melting a little bit, those are the days that they move. Just like today. Today, right now, on the November 27th, you need to look at your cameras. Those deer are on a vampire walk still from this full moon that we had this morning at 4 o'clock in the morning here in Illinois. We had a full moon, and we had 48-hour vampire walk that I call in front of every full moon, always. If you're looking at what days to hunt, mark off 48 hours, the 2 days, the 2 daylight days before that full moon, okay? And you'll have 2 to 3 a season. And if your wife only says you can hunt da-da-da-da-da, now I hope you don't have a marriage like that because it's not biblical. But if you are taking care of kids and your responsibilities, okay, that might be a different story. Or you're playing indoor golf and da-da-da-da. I'm not getting into that. But if you have commitments and you want to commit to when to hunt, October 28th was the full moon. And November 27th this morning was the full moon. So you're looking at 2 days before that. I killed one on October 28th. And last night, me and Jody went and could have killed a big buck. And we had deer everywhere on the edges of that food. You're going to be looking on the edges of that food. You've got your food plot right here. And you got your food plot here. You got your stand here. And then off into this top, you're going to have all of this brush, and those deer are hanging around in and out of this brush. Your cameras are not getting them. For you listeners at home, you imagine an X on the side of a big circle. That circle is your food plot. Your wind's blowing from that food to your X. And then on the other side of that X, you've got all this brush and this understory. It could be autumn olive. It could be just thicket or timber. You got to figure out how fast and easy and sneaky can I get to that blind or that stand. And then if that isn't happening, you need to do some due diligence and figure out how to be sneakier, whether that's a blind, whether that's a hole in the ground that you have to cover up and get in, whether that is planting miscanthus, whatever. That's number one for right now. be planning for next year. And if you're not getting there sneaky enough, you need to make that adjustment. Number one. Number two, those deer are going to start coming to that plot. The less they see you at that plot or feel your presence, the better off you're going to be. So how can we get in and out without ever getting busted? The wind is a big deal, but right now it's going to be a lot of eyesight. They're already heightened because they've been getting chased and running around, and they're looking for a fight, and now they're going to switch more to a predator mode where they're like, okay, the leaves are leaving. How far out can we see a predator? These are all the things that their instincts are going to start, focusing on. And so how you get in and out of food plots is going to be a big deal, because if you hunt once when the timing is right, when that full moon is there, when that temperature on that south warming day after a couple norths, like the Mark Drury's talk about and stuff, that is all true stuff. This is real deer science stuff. So if you can hunt on that warm up and you've got the perfect scenario, you're going to have more success than hunting every day. On the consoles, I try to set these up for late season, for middle of the season, for early season. Alfalfa, clover right now is the prime time for clover, with maybe a little bit of oats, maybe a little bit of brassicas. But boy, if you got clover right now, she's still green underneath that snow. She's still green underneath that cold. And right now they're going to key in on that. You're going to have bucks walk across it, scrapes around the edge. And you guys are listening back at home. You got to picture that circle. You got to picture that X. And then what's on the other side where those deer are coming from to enter that food plot? That's where these deer are hanging. If you don't have your cameras in those areas, don't be trusting your cameras. Don't be a digital, Nazi where you're talking about, it's probably not the right word, but don't be this digital stickler for only a picture that you get. I'm only hunting him if I get a picture. You're not going to get a picture. They're on the backside. They're really slipping by. Even yesterday, I watched them not enter the food plot, but they would stick their head out. They'd eat a little bit and stay in that brush. They're still sneaking away from these little bucks because these little bucks are little creepers. They're little creepos. They're still harassing these does. They still smell real good. They smell real freaky. They smell like they want to be bred, but they don't know the difference between a deer in estrus right now and a deer that just smells like she's in estrus. They just know she smells good. So they're not running in the food plot and relaxing. They are being creepy, getting away from the creepy little bucks, staying on the outsides of these food plots, and don't listen to your trail cameras. If you've got food, those deer are in and around it, and they're bedded really close. These bucks will be bedded really, really close. You're on the backside of the full moon. I don't like this little phase, but the weather will dictate. And these autumn olive trees losing their leaves, it will be good. So if you're going out there, and when you're going out there, you're going to have to put on your ninja skills, and you're going to have to be a little more patient and a little more sneaky of how you get in. And the patience is going to come from going in really early. You may have to go into the middle of the day to get a really great evening sit. And I just think this is when people slack off. And I really think this is when people lose their savagery. Like, they need to be a savage right now. This is when it gets back to, it's colder, boys and girls. It's harder. And this is what really sets the men and the boys apart, and the women and the little girls apart. This is when, who is sneakier? If I have a piece of property and my neighbor has a piece of property, and we both have food plots. We both have food plots. I'm drawing on my paper for everybody that's not watching on YouTube. I draw, these circles. These are the food plots, and I've got the food. Both of us have the food. Both of the bucks go to each food plot. This is where I will win. This is where I will win, because I will wait and hunt the right day or the right couple days, and my neighbor will hunt more days, and he will wait for that trail camera to go off and then hunt the deer. That deer's already moved through that food plot and he's on the next. If I come up with a plan, which is, I know I planted the food right, I know I've got the setup right, and I can predetermine when I'm going to go hunt from the weather, from the consistency of wind. And if I can get in and out of that thing more days with a bulletproof wind. Now, I'm not telling you not to hunt, but if your setup is perfect, I've got one at my farm where I can park at my barn. I can walk 100 yards through the standing cornet. And if I get a west wind, I can hunt there every day. And the more times I hunt that, the more deer flow past me out to the big food, what I call the hard food, as they follow the green brick road and they go out to the big food. I can hunt them every day. And the more deer we pass, pretty soon the giant will do the same thing and he will die. And if I can hunt them, and if you don't know what I'm talking about bulletproof or any of this, get a hold of me. This is what I do. Chris Brackett's LandLife. I will send you a contract. I will come to your state, your town, your farm. You will get 3 online consults where we screen share and we do this online and right from this office. And then we'll do, after the first one, I'll come to your property. We'll spend a whole day on it and I will work on this property with you. You will be on my team for the entire year. And it's not a matter of if you get your animal or see progress or see success. It's a matter of how much, and it's a matter of when you get that big buck, not if you get them. And that's Chris Brackett's Game Changers. And I would love to send you a contract. I'd love to talk to you about it. And we only take so many every year. So reach out, message us. Chris Brackett's LandLife Podcast, Chris Brackett's LandLife Facebook and Instagram. That's where you go follow all the goodies, all the good stuff, man. And yeah, it's just branding. It's just saying my name as much as I can so you know what to look up. A lot of the stuff will just pop up. And I want to help you. I want to help you. I want to tell you this is the time of year when the invasive plants lose their green. The deer stop eating them. They don't eat them off the ground and they'll start switching. And you're going to see, kind of a scenario around this clover and around not really beans right now. This is really concentrated right now. If I had to pick anything to have in my field, it's clover. This is really when for the next week and a half, you're going to see clover and you're going to see a little bit of brassica action. White gold fever with some radishes added in right next to some clover. Oh my gosh, that's dynamite, man. That's as good as it gets for right now. And it will be the same thing next year for 14 days. That's what they're going to want. And then they're going to dabble. You're going to start seeing them dabble with some corn, and then they're going to switch to beans. All of a sudden, one night you'll get a cold snap. They'll go all to beans. You'll have 20 deer on one standing bean field or out in the bean stubble, and then they'll do that for a week. Then they'll get their fill of that. It'll warm up a little bit, and they'll go back to some of this green stuff. They'll go back to that clover. They're going to eat this clover all the way till spring, till they eat it off to the ground, and then you got to sometimes I would frost seed again. You can add some alfalfa to it for some early season stuff. But this is all the expertise that we want to teach you. I say we because I can't do this by myself. This is all my partners. This is all my friends. And man, there's just so much to talk about. I love talking about this stuff, but life's hard. Thanksgivings are hard. If you're just catching this one, you never caught any of the other ones. This is kind of an every couple day update about what's going on through the season. Coming out of Illinois and then being able to talk to people across the different states. Right now, these bucks will come through your food plot in the morning, get their picture taken, but they're not bedded more than 100 yards from that food, and they're really just in this resting period. They're just resting. And if a doe walks by and she flickers her tail, he'll get up and go breed her if she's ready. Now, they kind of find them. They're coming to the party, bedded off the edge of these food plots, and they're paying attention to what's going on. So when you're slipping in these plots, man, you got to make sure you're slick because they're sitting right there somewhere, and they'll walk across at 2:00, but they may walk to the next farm and the next farm until they do the same thing all week. So you can't wait for the trail cameras to go off. The trail camera goes off in the morning. There's probably a 60% chance his buddy's going to be standing there at 2 to 4 o'clock that evening, and you better be in there early, and you better be in there quiet and slick and waiting for the wind to be perfect. But yeah, man, I'm a Illinois land broker with Herman Brothers Realty. If you're looking to sell a farm, maybe upgrade, maybe switch states, maybe, just list it. You're ready to list that farm. Maybe go looking for another one. I'll be happy to list your farm in Illinois. I'll be happy to find you the right broker in one of the other states, because I can work with these other folks in different states. I'm on your team. They'll pay me. Don't worry about paying me. They'll pay me. We're going to find you the right realtor in the right state, and let us be a team. This is what I'm here for. But I am a broker in Illinois, an agent. And I want to help you find a farm if you're in Illinois or if you're some other state. Now, I get questioned about this all the time. If somebody's going to buy in Iowa, I got a best friend over there, man, that's really good. And I got a whole bunch of guys that I know over there that's really good. I will work in tandem with them to find you the right guy to execute the plan that you, let's say you trust me, but you don't know some other broker somewhere else. Just call me. I'm going to give you the rundown on what I would do. And then we'll go after the right agent or the right broker in that state. And then we're a team. I'll get paid by them for a referral. Don't worry about that. Let's go buy some farms, man. Let's go find your dream. I'll also have some other things where I get questions all the time about leases. Well, I just called an outfitter today, and I called this outfitter, and we'll see if he wants to work with us. But it's kind of neat. They're taking less people. They're in a really great area, and they're doing almost a self-guided kind of check-in digitally. Here's your area, and they got some helpers. Kind of a cool thing. We're going to look at it. We're going to look at that here in the future as we go on. But there's a lot of season left. Don't get disheartened. Don't get disheartened. If you want to change your luck on your own property, get a hold of us. Game Changers Land Management. It's a big deal. It's a big deal to switch your farm up and put all the odds in your favor and back off those X's, make those deer stay on you, and then hunt them on these little edges and be able to just win all the time, win every single season, and look forward to it, enjoy it. And, you're buying that knowledge now. I'm coming to your farm. We're going to figure that out. If you want to take a tour of my farm this spring, you can book the Airbnb, bring some friends, and we'll do a tour right there on my farm. I have lots of people that own farms together. They all take a trip. They stay in my Airbnb. They fish my pond, and then they say, okay, here, I say, here's the price, and these guys will go dissect my 2 or 3 or 4 farms that I have, whatever we have time for, whatever they want to see. And they'll get to learn on what real ground on what we're doing and why it's set up the way it is and why it's successful. And we do them, and we make those personable, and then I have whitetaillandlife.com, which is where I get on my mouse and we explore your farm via the internet, and we screen share and we start looking at your farm. That's a great way to get to know me as well. And if you like that, I will discount the consult after the original online consult. And so that's on whitetaillandlife.com. I do several of those a week. So yeah, man, I hope you guys are having a great season so far. And if you are not, and you feel like everybody else on Facebook and Instagram has killed a big buck and you haven't, my favorite times of the year are still yet to come. The food plot seasons. These deer start focusing in on even locust pods. They start focusing in on smaller areas. The big bucks got to eat come December, come January. And don't get disheartened. Reach out to us. We're here to teach. We're here to teach you. We're here to help you. And yeah, man, that's pretty much it. I hope I covered everything. The only thing I think I left out was how to tell the difference between autumn olive and honeysuckle. Well, the autumn olive have the red berries and the little, look like big giant squirrel ears on them, and lots of them. And they're turning yellow right now, and they're falling off the trees. And as soon as they fall off the trees, these deer stop eating them. That's key to an autumn olive. The honeysuckle, they're a lot harder to break. They always have a little bit of thorns on there, and they're a lot hardier of tree, but they also don't spread as fast. And those are kind of the way to tell. And they're in the same areas. They love that sunlight. They love those side hills. Anywhere where that sun comes in there, they'll grow in the underbrush. But they also choke out all the new undergrowth of all the big trees and the mass trees. So you're going to need to keep those at bay. And and keep your timber healthy in certain areas, but then leave other areas alone and let those deer go there to rut and make baby deer, especially maybe if it's in the middle of your property. Those deer are more apt to be there instead of on the neighbors and get killed if you're trying to manage deer. But that's all the stuff we'll teach you. We're going to check out this gut check. I tried to get my wife to shoot a buck last night so we could check out this gut check that we put on some of our arrows. Check them out. They're not a sponsor, just some good dudes. I've been checking them out. And then big shout out to Herman Brothers Realty and Fisheries. Like I was catching gold trout I put in my pond at the Airbnb farm. They can help you get your fish just exploding. We build ponds there, man. We do about everything outdoors that you can think of between my companies and Herman Brothers. And I'm a broker in Illinois, like I said. And then shout out if you're in Owego or New York or even into Pennsylvania now. You got Lock and Load Sporting Goods with Ray and his boys. And then Bordeaux Brothers, Old Cubby up there in Vermont and New York and Maine. And, they've got a lot of cool stuff up there. But if you're going to be loyal to a company, these are the companies to talk to. They're some of my friends. And so I really appreciate them. I really appreciate you guys. If you have trouble with guy stuff and generational sin and you don't know the Lord and need to know the Lord and you just want to listen to some good content, go listen to all the other podcasts. One of them's about losing my dad 2 years ago and then just growing up with hard Vietnam veteran men trying to do their best and realizing that they're just like us. They're just as lost as us. And then being able to forgive and being able to grow and being able to know that God will move the mountain. I didn't move my mountain in front of me. And that's why I'm able to do this. So it's been a hard week for me. Thanksgiving's, I want to just survive and I just want to, have a peaceful living. I deal with a lot of pain every day, neck and back. And, it's one of the reasons I hold as much weight as I do at, 270, but I'm 6'1", I'm a big dude. I got still good muscle mass. I can go do what I want out in the wilderness and none of it ever bothers me, but the level of pain that I deal with, I don't know if it's something to do with Lyme disease or just inflammation or just the fact I wore my body out on the road and everything I've done, head-on collisions and hockey injuries and shoulders and whatever. But I tell you that us men live with pain. It's okay. We protect our women and, you don't have to be alone in that. That's something that addiction can come from the pain that we all deal with, whether it be in emotional and how we were raised. I don't have children. A lot of times that gets to me that I don't have anybody to teach and carry on my legacy. And then what does generational legacy and generational sin and all of that? But I know that I'm going to heaven. And most people think I'm crazy when I talk about, I can't wait. I can't wait to die. And that's not suicidal. That's just the fact that this isn't my home. And if it was this good here, killing big bucks and learning and there in heaven, I'll be pain free. And it's so comforting. Scrubbing everything to the Bible, even with the fact that somebody was on my live yesterday talking about you're belittling your wife. I'm like, nah, I'm just trying to get my wife to expect the fact that we're in a blood sport trying to kill an animal. And I need her to play up to a level that I can't do it for her. But this guy was, you haven't changed. And he said all this. And I simply told him on the Facebook Live, not joking, I'd love to punch that guy in the face. I'd love to punch him in the face. That's my flesh. It doesn't mean I'm going to. Doesn't mean I can't think about it. But I didn't. I mean, he's on my phone. I don't even know him. But my point is that our flesh wants to do one thing. Our flesh wants to lust, and our flesh wants to covet what the neighbor has. And our, flesh wants to have us put deer hunting in front of, our families. Our families want to put Thanksgiving and preparation for 3 or 4 days to have this unforgettable Thanksgiving before our mothers pass away. And, that's just not biblical as well. And so we have to make sure that everything that we have, we have to make sure that we're able to lay that on the altar, right? If we were to lay that at God's feet, whether it be deer hunting, whether it be bow hunting, if we feel, I can't live without that, right? If we need to be able to lay that down and never do that again, or that's an idol. That's a false idol that will affect everything in our hearts and in our lives. And that's where we're at. That's where we're at with the man thing, man. That's where we're at with this Chris Brackett's LandLife thing. This is my life. It's what I do. It's what I love. It's what I love to help with. Killing big deer. I can't tell you how easy that is for me as long as I'm healthy and can get out there and do it, because it's all mental. It's all mental. It's all knowledge. It's all consistency. That's super easy for me. And I have the talent to be able to still shoot really well. So that's easy for me. It's the other stuff. It's the life stuff. It's the being kind stuff. It's the trying not to be so short stuff. It's the fact that I can have more cojones to come in here and tell you about anything in my life and face it head on. That's the easy stuff for me. It's not for most people. But my hard part is having the kindness and the sweetness and the soft side. And that's what I have to work on. But most times I'm just happy that I don't have a needle in my arm, or I'm not, drunk all day, every day, because of the way that I was raised. So, and what I've been through. So I'm just saying, forgive yourself, boys and men. Forgive yourself. Communicate. Do the stuff that's hard. If it's hard for you, it's probably hard for most of us. Know that you're not alone. Reach out to us. I love you, man. Even though I may want to punch you in the face one day, I love you. And I would help you any way that I could. You can't hunt my property. You can't dance with my wife, but I'll help you. Whatever way I can, whatever information I have for you, that's my heart. I don't like people, but God says to guard my heart. And I know that I need to teach. And I was put in this world to teach and inspire and educate and entertain. But man, it's hard to be nice sometimes. So if you feel that, he's being short on his message or his post or his whatever, I don't have to patty cake you. You either like it or you don't. It doesn't matter to me one way or the other, but I am going to try to help you. And my spirit and my heart is to help. Love you all. This is Chris Brackett. This is LandLife. Booyah.